Sometimes I forget what silence sounds like. Not the peaceful kind, not the quiet of a sleepy Sunday morning or a held breath before a kiss. No, I mean the kind that buzzes behind your ears and sits heavy on your chest. That's the silence I've been living in lately, the kind where even the sound of your own thoughts feels like yelling. It's been 3 months since my mom passed lung cancer stage 4. We didn't even have time to hope. She was gone before I could say half the things I needed to. I've been packing up her apartment slowly, one drawer at a time, one picture frame, one cardigan, one little note tucked in a cookbook. I keep finding pieces of her everywhere. Her handwriting on old Post-its lipstick, stains on her favorite mug, the perfume she always wore still clinging to the arm of her coat. Last week, I was sitting on the floor in the middle of her living room with a half-full box of her books in front of me. Caden, my husband, walked in. He barely looked around before saying with a short laugh, "Wow, you still have boxes." I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. I just sat there holding her copy of Little Women with the frayed edges, wondering how the hell I'd ended up married to someone who could look at my grief like it was clutter. He started moving stuff, her books, her notepads like they were junk in his way. I said nothing, just watched him. He didn't even seem to notice. That was the first time it really sank in. He's not with me in this, like physically present, sure, emotionally miles away, and I was too exhausted to chase after him. The weird thing is, I don't even know when he started pulling away. Was it when Mom first got sick? Was it when I stopped smiling as much, stopped laughing at his jokes, stopped reaching for him at night? Or was it even before that? Maybe I just didn't want to see it. Caden's always been the type who needs things light, easy. He hates heavy energy, as he calls it, but grief is heavy, and I didn't choose this. I didn't choose to lose the only person who ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. My dad, he's remarried. His new wife has 2 grown kids who he dotes on like they're his own. When I visit, I feel like a guest in a house I grew up in, like a background character in a show that used to star me. So it's just me now. Me, Caden, and Emma, our daughter, she just turned 4. She's the reason I get out of bed in the morning. She's also the reason I haven't completely shattered. But even parenting feels one-sided lately. I handle everything. Breakfast, daycare bills, doctor's appointments, bedtime tantrums. Caden mostly just exists around us, scrolls his phone, says he's tired, goes out more and more to clear his head or meet the guys. Sometimes he tells me he's helping Sylvia from the gym with her form or her budget or something vague like that. I don't even ask anymore. Last night, it all cracked open. Emma was having a rough evening, crying, clinging to my leg, begging me not to leave her room. Caden told her to stop crying, which obviously didn't help. So I picked her up, did the whole song and story routine in her bed, tucked her in tight, and rubbed her back until her breathing slowed. When I came back out, Caden was on the couch, phone in hand, TikTok blasting at full volume. I asked him gently, "Hey, can you please start the dishwasher?" He rolled his eyes like I'd asked him to build a house. "You're being bossy again," he muttered. Something inside me cracked. I said, "I can't do this alone, I'm drowning." He didn't look at me when he said, "You're not the only one who lost someone. At least I'm not making everyone miserable about it." And that broke me because he barely even knew my mom. He barely visited her in the hospital. He said her sadness made him uncomfortable. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. Sat on the closed toilet, hands shaking, trying not to cry so loud Emma would hear. 5 minutes later, he was banging on the door, full on, slaps, not knocks. Yelling that I was hiding again, that I was selfish, that I needed to stop mourning someone who isn't coming back. I told him to leave me alone. He kept yelling until Emma started crying again down the hall. That's when I knew. This isn't just grief anymore. This is erosion of my home, my strength, my self-worth. I walked out and told him to go. If being here with us was so miserable, he could leave. He grabbed his jacket, slammed the door. The picture frame in the hallway fell off the wall from the force. I taped it back up because, honestly, I couldn't deal with broken glass on top of everything else. Emma was still sniffling, so I let her curl up beside me on the couch. We watched cartoons until she drifted off, her little fingers tangled in my sleeve. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was the life I'd signed up for, if this was what love looked like when it rotted from the inside out, and if it was, why was I still clinging to it? The next morning, I made coffee without even tasting it. I just went through the motions. Water filter scoop brew, like muscle memory, was the only thing keeping me upright. Emma was curled on the couch under her bluey blanket, holding her bunny like it was the only stable thing in her world. She looked up at me with those sleepy eyes and whispered, "Is Daddy mad at us?" I froze for a second, mug halfway to my lips. I wanted to say something soothing, something simple, But all that came out was, no, baby. Daddy's just tired, but she didn't buy it. She's 4, not stupid. She sees everything. After dropping her off at daycare, I sat in the car for a solid 5 minutes, just breathing or trying to. You know that feeling where your chest is tight, but you're not crying, not yelling, you're just full, like you've reached capacity and there's nowhere left for the pain to go. That's where I was. I texted Kaden, "Are you picking her up today?" No, answer. I didn't expect one. It was becoming a pattern, me reaching out, him ignoring me, picking up the slack. Eventually, I left work early again and went to get her myself. Not that anyone at my job noticed or cared. I walked in with a half apology ready, and Emma's teacher, sweet, well-meaning Stephanie, tilted her head and asked gently, "Is everything all right at home?" It hit me like a slap. I blinked too fast, laughed too loud, and said, "Oh, just a rough patch. Grief, still trying to adjust." She nodded, but I saw it in her eyes. She knew kids talk. Emma probably told her something, probably said too much in the innocent way kids do. Probably said daddy yells or mommy cries in the bathroom. And maybe that's when I realized I wasn't just losing myself. I was losing the version of me Emma needed most. That night, I made macaroni and cheese for dinner because it was the only thing left in the pantry. I sat across from Emma at the kitchen table while she dipped cucumber slices into ketchup and sang softly to herself. Caden came home after dark. No apology, no explanation. He looked at us like we were background noise, walked straight to the bathroom for a shower, and came out in sweatpants like nothing happened. Emma ran up to him, her whole face lighting up. She opened her arms and said, "Daddy," and he, I swear to God, barely touched her. Just a limp pat on the head and "I'm tired, kiddo." She wilted like a flower that stopped being watered, and the worst part, she didn't even cry. She just quietly turned back to her crayons and kept coloring. Later, I tried to talk to him. I said, "We need to figure something out. This is not working." He didn't even look up from his phone, just scrolled, then shrugged and said, "Maybe we should take some time apart." I stood there in the hallway with a basket of unfolded laundry in my arms and thought, what does that even mean? Take space from what? From parenting? From responsibility? I told him that's not how this works. You don't get to opt out of your family when it's hard. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "Maybe if you stopped acting like a funeral, I wouldn't have to." I think I stopped breathing. It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked into the bedroom and shut the door behind me like it was the only shield I had left. An hour later, I heard his phone buzzing in the guest room. I didn't mean to look I didn't, but when I walked past the screen, lit up with a message. "Bernice, let me know when you're free Friday." My stomach flipped, Bernice. His cousin's wife married sweet, harmless, right? But something about that heart emoji made my skin crawl. Something about the way he smiled when he read it, then quickly flipped the phone over, made me feel like a fool. I asked him, "Are you talking to Bernice?" He looked up, smirked like I was overreacting, and said, "You're paranoid." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, "I'm done being the only one who cares about this family." He rolled his eyes and stormed out to the balcony. I followed. We yelled. He slammed the glass door hard enough to rattle the frame. Emma cried again that night. I tucked her in and whispered every comforting lie I could think of. Told her daddy was just tired. Told her mommy was fine. Told her everything was okay. And then I sat in the hallway outside her room, hugging my knees and wondering how I became the one begging for scraps of kindness in my own home. I wasn't angry anymore. I was hollow. Tired in a way I didn't know you could be tired. Not sleepy, just worn out from trying, from covering for him, from holding together a life that only one of us still seemed to care about. The day I stopped crying over Caden wasn't because I healed. It was because I'd run out of tears. That morning, I stood in the kitchen pouring cereal for Emma while she hummed quietly to herself. It was a Tuesday, I think, the kind of day that feels like a blur before it even begins. Caden hadn't come home the night before. No call, no text, just silence, the kind that no longer surprised me. And me, I didn't even check my phone for him when I woke up. I checked it for daycare reminders, for a grocery list, for a weather update to see if Emma needed a jacket. It hit me somewhere between pouring the milk and finding her shoes. I'd stopped hoping. That part of me, the one who used to wait up for him, who used to refresh messages, who used to pray, he'd walk through the door with even a scrap of decency, she was just gone. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Bernice. She asked if I could recommend a good pizza place for her kid's birthday party. Totally normal, except something didn't sit right. So I asked, "Is Caden with you guys?" She replied instantly. "What? No." Why would he be? My stomach dropped. Because just the night before, he told me he was heading to Silvio's. Bernice's husband, I didn't answer her. I just stared at my screen for a long time, hands cold, heart numb. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even feel angry. I felt done pretending, done guessing, done letting him gaslight me into thinking this was normal. He came home around midnight, smelling faintly of beer and someone else's perfume. I asked him, "Where were you?" He shrugged, said I was paranoid, told me I needed to stop obsessing over every little thing. That's when I told him I called Bernice. He froze for a second, just 1 second. Then it was like a switch flipped. He went off yelling about boundaries, about privacy, about how I made him feel like a prisoner, said I was turning into my mother, which didn't even make sense. But he said it like a weapon. I stood still, arms crossed, and said quietly, "You've been lying to me. You know it, I know it." He knocked over a chair, storming out of the kitchen, and that's when I followed him. For the first time in months, I followed him. I wasn't chasing answers anymore. I was gathering clarity. When he tried to slam the bathroom door, I knocked. Not angrily, just firm, he opened it. Arms folded, chin raised like he was ready for a fight. Instead, I said, "You can leave, you can go wherever you need to go, but you're not taking Emma with you." His eyes narrowed. "You're not fit to decide that," he said. "I'm her father. I have just as much right." I didn't raise my voice, didn't flinch. I just said, "You lost your right to call the shots the moment you started disappearing." He muttered something under his breath, brushed past me, and slammed the guest room door. The picture on the wall rattled. I stood in the hallway listening to the silence settle like dust. For once, it didn't scare me, because I knew this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a survival arrangement, and I was the only one still showing up. That night, Emma crawled into my bed around 2 a.m., her little face pressed against mine. She whispered, "I had a dream. Daddy left and didn't come back." I wrapped my arms around her and whispered back, "I'm right here, baby. Mommy's not going anywhere." And in that moment, somewhere between the sound of her breathing and the quiet hum of the streetlight outside, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud yet. I am not crazy. I am not overreacting. I am not impossible to love. I'm just finally seeing the truth. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Healing didn't look the way I thought it would. There was no big moment of triumph, no dramatic scene with Caden begging me to forgive him, no clean break or final closure. It looked like me standing at the kitchen sink doing dishes in silence while Emma colored at the table. It looked like microwaving frozen nuggets and cutting up apple slices with her plastic kid knife because she wanted to help Mommy. It looked like checking the mail setting boundaries and learning how to breathe again without apologizing for it. That morning after Emma's nightmare, I got up before the sun made a to-do list on the back of an old envelope. Call the building manager, look up therapists, find a family lawyer, make sure the bunny is clean for bedtime. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I just knew I had to start doing something. When I called the property office to ask about changing the locks, they told me I needed Caden's signature or a court order. I hung up and just sat there for a minute staring at the tile floor. It didn't feel fair, but I was learning. Fair has nothing to do with healing. You heal when you stop waiting for permission to protect yourself. I started keeping notes, not out of spite, but for documentation. Every time he missed a pickup, every time he yelled, every time Emma cried after he left, I wrote it all down. Because if this went to court, I needed facts, not just memories clouded by emotion. I also found a therapist. It took 3 tries. The first one kept interrupting me. The second said I should try couples counseling. But the third, a woman named Diane with soft eyes and a voice like calm water, just listened, really listened. She said something in our second session that stuck with me. "You don't have to be a hero to deserve peace. You just have to stop sacrificing yourself to save someone who doesn't want to be saved." That night, I sat on the floor with Emma helping her build a lopsided Lego house. She asked if Daddy was coming home soon. I said, "Not tonight, sweetie. He needs some time." She nodded and went back to building. No tears, no tantrum, just quiet acceptance, the kind that broke my heart a little. She was adapting, and I wasn't sure if that made me feel proud or guilty. I tried to create small rituals of normalcy. Saturday morning pancakes, even if they were just the frozen kind. Sunday night movies under the blanket. Fort midweek ice cream walks when the weather cooperated. Caden kept texting, sometimes polite, sometimes hostile. Sometimes trying to reset, sometimes trying to guilt trip me. But I stopped letting my mood swing with his tone. I replied when it was about Emma. I ignored anything else. The day he asked if he could take her for the weekend without warning, I said no. Firm calm. I told him we needed a proper agreement and no group chats with his mother and sister didn't count. He said I was being difficult. I said, protecting my daughter isn't difficult, it's my job. That was the first time I saw him look confused, like he didn't know who I was anymore. Maybe because I wasn't begging, I wasn't crying, I wasn't trying to make him understand, I was just done. That night, after putting Emma to bed, I sat on the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, sipping lukewarm tea. For the first time in weeks, I noticed the sound of birds again, the breeze, the warmth of the mug in my hands. I closed my eyes and remembered my mom. She would have been proud of me, not because I was strong. She always said strength was overrated, but because I didn't let the pain turn me bitter, because I chose clarity over chaos, because I finally remembered that I'm allowed to want peace. I used to think strength looked like holding everything together, keeping the house clean, keeping the peace, keeping quiet. Now I know real strength is choosing yourself even when no one claps for you, even when it feels like the loneliest choice in the world. Caden tried to come back. Not with flowers or apologies, but with logistics. He texted me in a group chat with his mom and sister, said he'd be picking Emma up for the weekend and that he'd already made arrangements, as if I was just a clerk in his schedule, not her mother. His mom replied with some variation of, "We're here to support however we can." Stephanie sent a thumbs up. I stared at the screen for a full minute before texting Caden privately. "If you want to see your child speak to me, not a committee." He replied, "I'm tired of your drama. I'll be there at 9 a.m. Saturday." Saturday came. Emma was still in pajamas watching cartoons. I was drinking coffee at the counter, already bracing myself for the storm. 9:02 a.m. He knocked. Not alone. Of course. His mom and Stephanie stood beside him holding a Tupperware of cookies like this was some kind of intervention. He tried to walk past me. I didn't move. I stood in the doorway and said, "We're going to talk first." He rolled his eyes and started his usual script about how I was keeping his daughter from him, how I was unstable, how I always had to be in control. I didn't react, didn't raise my voice, didn't cry. I simply said, "You are not taking her for the weekend without a written agreement, a plan and mutual consent, period." He started yelling. Stephanie stepped in, tried to mediate, saying, "Let's just focus on what's best for Emma." I looked at her, this woman who'd called me too emotional just 2 weeks ago, and said, "I am. That's why I'm not letting chaos walk in and out of her life like a revolving door." Caden tried to push past me again, literally this time. Not hard, but firm. I stepped in front of him, hand on the door frame, and said, "You push me one more time, I call the building manager and then the police. We are not doing this in front of my child." Emma peeked out from behind the couch holding her bunny. Her eyes were wide, nervous. His mother finally stepped in and whispered, "Caden, enough." He stepped back, fists clenched. I told him, "You want to take her to the park for a few hours? Fine. But not overnight, not today." He muttered, "You'll regret this." I handed him a bag with snacks, wipes, a water bottle, and the bunny. He left without looking me in the eye. The moment the door clicked shut, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. And then I sat on the couch, didn't cry, didn't shake, just sat. Solid still. They brought Emma back right at 3 p.m. She was tired but smiling. She said they saw ducks. Caden tried to make small talk. I just said, "Thanks, see you next time," then closed the door and locked it. After that, things shifted. He stopped showing up unannounced. His messages got shorter, more transactional. Stephanie stopped texting. His mother went quiet. It was like they all realized at once. I wasn't playing anymore, and I started sleeping better. I started leaving my phone in the other room. I started journaling again, not rage entries, but reflections, dreams, ideas. I bought a new set of sheets, cleaned out the closet, started filling my life back in with colors and warmth and people who showed up when they said they would. Emma is laughing more these days. She's still adjusting, still asks about Daddy, and I always answer truthfully, gently, but truthfully. The other night, she asked, "Is Daddy mad because you're brave?" I didn't know what to say, so I just pulled her into my lap and said, "Daddy has his own feelings, but you and me, we're doing okay." She nodded and fell asleep on my shoulder. And I sat there rocking her slowly, thinking, this is the version of motherhood I always wanted to become. Not perfect, not polished, but grounded, honest, present. I don't know what comes next. Maybe a custody arrangement, maybe a new apartment, maybe a chapter where I rediscover what I want, not just what I'm escaping from. But I do know this. I'm not shrinking anymore. I'm not explaining myself to people who never wanted to understand. I'm not sacrificing my peace to keep someone else from feeling uncomfortable. I'm not broken. I'm building. And if that makes me difficult, then so be it. Pause, Roy Nyan Yang. If you were me, what would you have done?